didn't finish last week. Who won?
I won.
Of course you won.
I won. Yep, I won.
Bullied his way all the way to the top, didn't he?
Kind of, yeah.
Nah, Hoodie gave me a pass.
We think he cheated somehow.
Are you guys doing like side bets at the end of like the season? Who's ever got more wins?
That's what we should do, honestly.
Point system. Can you do a point system?
I'm just a gambling degenerate. I am always thinking about side bets.
I'm completely on board with that line of thinking, Luke. So
Love
if
it.
you guys want to insert gambling to this, do a little side bet action, make it a little bit more competitive, I'm down.
All right, welcome to episode 3 of the Vikings Territory Roundtable. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Luke Inman. Luke is a Vikings fanatic, but he's also a writer for Cold Omaha. And are they going by zone coverage now, Luke, or is it Cold Omaha?
Goofy shift, yeah. They probably should have started with zone coverage.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I'm pointing people in the right direction. So,
I mean, I guess we can make fun of it now. Like Cold Omaha, what does that even mean? Like, it's just so confusing.
Those guys are my friends. I'm not going to make fun of them.
Okay. Well,
But you know Luke from Twitter. He's a draft whiz. He's an awesome photographer. He's an avid podcaster. So thanks for joining us, Luke. Go ahead and wave so everybody knows where you're at.
hey, it feels good to be here, guys. I made the cut. I don't have any speech or anything written, but I'm ready to get started.
We're not expecting a speech. So everybody else. Should we do it again? We can do it again.
Pretty good last time. It looked pretty legit last time you did it.
We can do it again. I don't even remember what I just did. I felt like it was pretty bad, but
I blacked out.
I didn't hold mine. I was like this, and I just sat here.
It's all right. So I'll make it look super cool afterwards. All right. So last week we hit on Alshon Jeffrey and what that meant for Laquan Treadwell. However, we didn't really talk about potentially what it meant for Stefon Diggs. So I wanted to start the show off by talking about your guys' thoughts on whether or not Stefon Diggs can be the number one wideout for the Vikings, and whether or not you think the team views him as a potential number one wideout. We're going to start up in the top left corner with Sam, and we'll work our way around.
Well, guys, I wasn't around to discuss Alshon Jeffrey last week, but I did agree with some of the opinions I heard here, is that, listen, no matter how hard Spielman went after him, there's a good player on the market. He's doing his job by at least seeing where he's at and doing his due diligence with that player, whether he's going to bring him in or not. So it didn't bug me at all in terms of the Vikings roster that the Vikings showed some interest in Jeffrey. In terms of Diggs, I've been saying this for years, guys. He can be Antonio Brown light. He has the skill set to be a number one receiver. His first 2 years in the league actually compare very favorably to Antonio Brown. When you look at it, Brown actually took 4 years to really break out and become the guy he is. Obviously, when you're comparing someone to probably the best all-around wide receiver in the game, that's a tough act to follow. But Stefon Diggs, I have no doubt he has the talent and the skills and the work ethic to be a number one receiver. The only thing, obviously, we have to wonder about is his health and his ability to stay on the field. That's the thing that's been in question the first 2 seasons. If he can stay on the field, he can be a number one receiver.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think, BJ?
Yeah, I think Sam kind of hit it out of the park there, to be quite honest with you. This is a guy that I got on board with before his rookie season even. I watched him at training camp. You could see how hard his cuts were, how quickly he was getting in and out of his breaks, whether he knew the route depth. It seemed like it was a very seamless transition from Maryland to the Vikings, and I didn't see that coming at all from a guy that was basically a gadget play at Maryland, but he's made himself into a very well-rounded player. He makes himself available to the quarterback, whether that's Teddy Bridgewater or Sam Bradford. He's developed a good rapport with both guys. I mean, Sam Bradford's initial performance was the best game in Stefon Diggs' career, the Week 2 win against the Packers at US Bank. So the guy is a bona fide stud when he needs to be, when he's called upon. We saw him get back-to-back 13-reception games last season. He can do it all. He can go deep. He can go intermediate. He can hit you short. He can do the gadget plays too. He's got all the skills to do it. It's, once again, like Sam said, it's the health thing. He's been hurt both the last 2 seasons. It seems like he always has that nagging hamstring injury or something like that a lot of wideouts deal with. That's really the biggest concern for me is if he can stay healthy for a full 16-game season. Otherwise, I think the sky's the limit for Stefon Diggs.
So is there any concern from anyone? Because I agree with most of what's been said so far, but it also seems like there's a tendency to where he'll disappear for a few games. And I'm wondering, if everything you guys are saying is true, what's the reasoning for his disappearance? Is it other factors? Is it quarterback play? Or because that's one of the only things that kind of makes me question whether or not he can be a true number one. Is just I think maybe the consistency isn't always there, but maybe that's other issues. I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
Well, I think looking back to his rookie season, I think kind of he faltered down the stretch, and I think part of that is just because he was matched up against elite cornerbacks, matchup after matchup. Remember, Patrick Peterson locked him down at Arizona. That's just one example, but I think he kind of had that target on his back once he kind of showed up in the NFL as the number one guy on the Vikings and this elite route runner and whatnot, so teams kind of have game plan against him. But as far as going back to like Jeffrey and then 12 prior to, there was some interest from the Vikings. I think simply the Vikings are just trying to put another incredible weapon for Sam Bradford. Just think about Jeffrey, Thielen, Diggs, all three of them together, or Pryor, or who else it would have been. That could be turn this offense. That was relatively kind of pedestrian last year. That could turn this offense into one that's a top 10, top 5 offense potentially. If the offensive line can find some consistency. So that's just, I think, what the Vikings are doing. And then kind of this latest, rumor about like Rod Streeter and Torrey Smith, I think they're kind of more looking with those guys trying to find a role guy that can stretch the field for Bradford and his deep accuracy. So I don't think it really pertains to Diggs and Thielen like kind of what the question may have been.
So I'm looking at his stats right now, and he had three games where he exceeded 100 yards last season. He had a big week against Washington in Week 10, 164 yards, and then after that, he kind of fell off again. 37 yards at Arizona, 59 yards at Dallas, 55 at Jacksonville, 13 at Indianapolis, and 29 at Green Bay. I don't know. How do you explain something like that, Adam? And what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think for all the reasons said, I do think Diggs is a number one wideout. And I think the pursuit of Jeffrey came out of a unique situation where very few NFL teams can actually afford to pay 2 top 32 wide receivers and pay them like top 32 wide receivers. So the Vikings have this window where Diggs is on his rookie contract, and they actually have the luxury of all this cap space, so they can actually pay 2 top 32 wide receivers in Jeffrey and Diggs. So I think that's where you get the exploration of Jeffrey during free agency. But in terms of explaining Diggs' disappearing act, I think it all goes back to the weakest link. Team is only as good as its weakest link, and the weakest link last year was the running game and the offensive line. I think that took all the wind out of the sails of this offense. Not to mention, he had a little turnover at the leadership position on offense in the middle of the season last year. That could certainly be excused away.
Yeah, okay. Austin, you disagree at all, or you agree with what everyone said so far?
I don't disagree. I almost look at it like, imagine if the Vikings had landed someone like Alshon Jeffrey. I think a guy like Diggs is positionless in that he doesn't need to be the split receiver. He doesn't need to be the Z receiver, the X receiver, whatever. He doesn't need to be the slot receiver. He can play, and that's kind of what BJ was saying, is he can do it all. He can run deep, he can run short. And Brett, I want to ask you, how many games did Stefon Diggs have where he had at least 9 catches? Because I could have sworn last year he broke a single game receiving record.
He went back-to-back 13.
Yeah, he went back-to-back 13. So I don't think there's any question in terms of his ability to beat one-on-one coverage, to find holes in zones, to run underneath, to do all the things that they need him to do in Pat Shurmur's offense. I think it goes back to his days at Maryland and his early, rookie season. Can he stay healthy? And the answer right now is no, and that's why you sign a guy like Adam Thielen, who has been nothing but Mr. Dependable. But to answer your question, no, I'm not worried about Stefon Diggs. I think he's fine.
Okay, Luke, let's have you chime in really quick before we kick one of these guys off the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of you guys hit on a lot of great points. I think I remember going into, after his rookie season, going into last year, I remember talking to a couple of Viking personnel people, and the plan from the get-go with Stefon Diggs was to solidify him as the slot receiver. And I think, just to answer the question, I think not only can he be the number one, I think he is the number one. He's just not the traditional number one outside guy. And I think when you look at, targeting Alshon Jeffrey, I think that speaks a lot more to their boundary receivers and how they feel about those guys. And obviously Treadwell now is that guy. So I think it's a big red flag, to be honest. I think they aren't prepared to really get the most out of Treadwell as maybe they thought they were last year. And keep in mind his age and the big thing, the injury that he was coming off 2 years ago, a nasty leg injury, and I'm not sure he was ever fully 100% going into last season. So I think Diggs is the man. I mean, you mentioned some numbers. 84 catches, I think, over 900 yards in 13 games started. So if he can stay healthy, which, I mean, you can say this for a lot of talented guys in the NFL. If he can stay healthy, he's a 100-catch guy and he's a 1,000-yard receiver. And I think clearly he's the best route runner and he's the most explosive weapon they have on offense. So it's just a matter of staying healthy, like a lot of you guys mentioned, and being able to get him the ball. I think a couple of you guys touched on, he really slid off after those first 5 games. Everybody did. And you can't put enough emphasis on, a guy like Norv Turner leaving, too. It's going to have a big effect on everybody. But they just couldn't block at the end of the day. That's no secret. And I think that's why you saw Sam Bradford really, his average depth of throw gets brought up a lot. You saw him so many dump-offs because he just didn't have enough time.
Yep. Right. Okay, yeah. So what do you think, Luke? We got to get one of these guys out of here.
Tough call, man.
I know. I was kind of hoping someone would kind of take the contrarian take, but I guess everyone is in 100% agreement.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody want to just come out and say, "Hey, I don't want to be here anymore"? Does anybody have, anybody got laundry or anything they got to do right now? Nothing personal to anybody. Drew, I'm going to cut you off the chopping block tonight, all right? I hope you I loved your attitude. I loved your energy.
All right. No, that's understandable.
Drew has homework he's got to get to.
The solid choice, Duke. Solid choice.
Love it.
Yeah. So Drew, what do you want to say to the people? Do you I don't. Do you want to beg Luke to change his mind? Do you want to say goodbye?
No, I'm not.
My PayPal, but it's.
Well, I do want to say that Little Caesars is the best value pizza you can find, and that's a
that doesn't deserve any sort of response.
And then there was.
I love that he's still on that bit.
Yeah, I don't know how long we're gonna milk that, but I don't know.
I like milking it. I wanted to get an advertisement out of it. An advertising deal with Little Caesars.
I'm pretty sure we've bashed them pretty thoroughly though as well. So it's I don't know.
Hey, any press is
that's what I was gonna say. I guess press is good press. So all right, so we're gonna we're gonna move towards the draft a little bit, and I'm interested to get your take on this too, Luke, since that's kind of your forte. There's been multiple reports to this point of the Vikings being interested in the very talented yet also troubled Joe Mixon. So my question to you guys is, Joe Mixon worth the baggage or nah? Should the Vikings pass, or do you think he has the talent requisite of overlooking all that stuff? So I'll start. I always feel like I'm starting with Sam, so I'm going to start with Austin down in the bottom right-hand corner this time.
Well, I haven't done the film work or the research or the study on Mixon like a lot of people. I'm sure, Luke, you have.
You're off to a great start.
Drew, I'm trying. I'm trying to appeal. So, it's funny to me that people are like, "Well, is he a fit? It doesn't make sense. Why would they be interested in a guy like this?" Well, everything I've read, everything I've seen, He's the best back in the class. He's the most talented. He's the most explosive. And they had a player on the roster who they flew to his house and convinced him to come back after he got in a lot of trouble for beating on his kid. So it's not like they don't have a history of, working with players who have had past issues or past problems, especially with domestic issues. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not necessarily a fan of bringing in someone with a past like that. I can't condone that, but to say it surprises me would be wrong. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. So in your opinion, is he worth it or no?
No.
Okay, so he's not. So
I'm Team Latavius Murray, so.
Okay, so you're the Vikings GM and you're saying no, it's not worth it.
Pass.
Yes. Okay. All right, what about you, Adam?
Players that come in with baggage remind me of players that come in with an injury history. It can work out basically three different ways. The baggage comes back and they do something bad and everyone says, you should have seen it coming. Or the player has no baggage whatsoever and they still get in trouble anyways because it can happen to a player that doesn't have a past. Or the player redeems himself and goes on to have a great NFL career.
And then the team comes out looking amazing.
And then you look like a genius because you gave the guy a second chance and he went on to be productive and lead you to 12 Super Bowls or whatever. So I really think none of us are qualified, including Luke, who I'm sure has done far more research than the rest of us. But unless you actually know the guy, which I think is what Mike Zimmer was probably trying to accomplish at the pro day and what the Vikings would try to accomplish at the combine during their interviews, unless you actually get to know the guy and figure out what he's made of underneath the helmet, it's really, really hard to say whether or not he's worth the baggage. Because the baggage might just disappear over time. Not for good. That stuff's going to be on the internet for a long, long time. But I guess my issue with Mixon is you've got Jet on the roster, you've got Murray freshly signed on the roster, and I'm not real big on positional needs. As most of you know, I prefer the best player available to a certain extent. But if we're talking about the second round pick, our top pick here, and Mixon's the guy, of course it depends how the board falls, but there's like 7 other positions I'd rather address before running back with that first pick. So I have a hard time seeing any running back really get too seriously considered because of positional value and the guys we already have on the roster that we're fairly committed to at this point.
Okay. BJ?
Yeah, I've made it pretty clear that I'm pretty against guys that have the domestic violence history. I've given Greg Hardy a run for his money on Twitter for sure. I'm with Adam when he says that we can't know the guy underneath the helmet without knowing the guy, and I'm all about giving guys second chances. If you guys know me at all, I'm a huge Michael Vick fan, and the reason why I'm a huge Michael Vick fan is because of how he has been able to redeem himself, and the way that he came back, the way that he kind of understood what he did was completely unacceptable in society, and then he went about redeeming himself, both in becoming a new person and advocating against what he had been in the past. I'm not sure, and again, I don't know Joe Mixon, so it's tough for me to say this, but I don't know if he really understands the gravity of the situation that he created. I'm not sure if he knows how wrong that is. If Mike Zimmer does know that, and I'm very proud of our coach for doing his due diligence on this, and I think it speaks a lot about this team and how much it values character, how much Mike Zimmer has spent time trying to get to know the man underneath the helmet, as Adam said. That's super important to me, and if Mike Zimmer determines that his character is that he's not going to ever do this type of thing again, I can probably get on board with it. It's going to be difficult for me because I'm very against this sort of thing. But at the same time, I do believe in second chances, and the guy is unbelievably talented. This is a guy that can come in, he can run between the tackles, he can explode outside, he can run out of the shotgun, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a multi-purpose back that would give the Vikings a different element, even from what they already have in McKinnon and Latavius Murray. So the value is certainly there. I would personally rather take an offensive guard in the second round. I hate to beat a dead horse, but Forrest Lamp looks really good at 48 right now. So that's where I would personally go, and I would rather take that gamble in the third round, assuming it's still available. But at the same time, I mean, if they took him in the second round, I would say overall I'm probably against it, but more for the reasons that I don't think that taking a running back in the second round makes sense than my being against his person at this point, because I do trust the Vikings to do their due diligence on his character, and if they deem him acceptable, I would do my very best to deem him acceptable as well.
Okay. All right, Sam, wrap us up on this one real quick, and then we can get to Luke.
Yeah, well, I certainly understand why the team is doing their due diligence. Like BJ said, he would be a tremendous value at where they're drafting in the second round, and he would just add a new dimension to the offense, regardless of positional need. This is an extremely talented player on an offense that needs more of those. That's just simply the case. So with Mixon, these guys make great points that none of us know Joe Mixon, so we can't really make a good call on whether or not this will be an ongoing thing or something in the past. And the same for the Vikings. Mike Zimmer doesn't know him well. Rick Spielman doesn't know him well, but they're going to have to make a call just the same, and they're going to have to decide if this is one really, really bad thing he did, but one isolated incident, or if this is a pattern and this is who this person is. He did this thing when he was 17 or 18, I think. That's not diminishing it at all. It was a terrible, terrible thing. But I've seen a lot of people who essentially said, because of this punch, because of this bout of domestic abuse, Joe Mixon shouldn't be drafted by any team. My question to them is, then, can he play in the NFL? You don't want him drafted. Then, if you don't want him drafted, can he play in the NFL? And if your answer is no, where is he allowed to work? Because I understand what he did was terrible, but the way things work in this society is that someone does a bad thing, they pay their penance, and then we allow them back into the public and we move on. That's the only way to do things. We can't ostracize guys forever for one thing they did, no matter how bad it is. Except in a few cases, like life in prison. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about here. So,
You're killing it.
The team's going to have to make that decision, whether or not this is an isolated incident or this is a pattern and this is who this person is. If they have an inkling that this is who Joe Mixon is and he doesn't understand the gravity of what he's done, or this is something that could happen again in the future, they should stay far, far away from him. I also am interested in Luke's opinion on this because I know he has done the film work.
Well, I didn't segue, man. There you go.
Awesome stuff, all of you guys, and I'll probably reiterate a lot of what you mentioned. But when I look at the player Joe Mixon, who arguably is a top 10, top 15 talent at worst, I'm thinking that there's no way, even at 48, would I touch this guy. And for me personally, here's why: is because the running back position is so devalued now. It's so watered down that, if it's one of those positions that if I'm running the show, I'm drafting two guys on day 3 every year, and I'm just going to find one or two guys that I can form a two-headed monster, and basically I'm going to run them into the ground. Honestly, I don't really think most guys can last more than 4 or 5 years with the wear and tear that an NFL team puts on them. I had Pete Prisco from CBS Sportsline on last week, and he said, everybody thinks Zeke Elliott was the better pick over Jalen Ramsey. Ask me in 5 years after Zeke Elliott has all that wear and tear on him, and Jalen Ramsey is able to play 10, 12 years at a Pro Bowl level. So I think it's one of those things that you also look at the offensive line. Todd Gurley was the man 2-3 years ago when he was drafted. But you look at when you don't have an offensive line, it really doesn't matter anyways. And I think that's why that pick needs to be an offensive lineman, whoever the best available guy is, which, I'm sure we'll get into maybe who's going to be there at 48. 47 picks to go by is a lot of players to go by and off the board before your first pick. So it's tough to really gauge who's going to be there. But I think they still need to turn their biggest weakness, which we already talked about, into somewhat of a strength. And they started by getting 2 good tackles, but they still need to finish the job and go get at least one interior guy, if not another backup tackle, in case somebody goes down. So worth it at 48. Even without the PR nightmare? No. With the PR nightmare, for me, there's just no way. Now, saying that's for me, Rick Spielman has already shown he's willing to take running backs early, which surprised me when he took Toby Gerhardt in the second round and Jerick McKinnon, who I think we all like, but he's shown that he's willing to take that position fairly high too. So he may be in a different boat.
Which round was McKinnon? 3, right?
Third.
Was he third?
Round, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
76, right?
Something like that. Yep.
And we traded up to get Gerhardt.
We traded up. Yeah. So, and Chris Cook, I believe. Well, I think that was in the same draft, but yeah.
Ouch. Yeah. All right, so Luke, we got to get rid of one of these guys again. So I feel like everyone did a great job on that one, man.
Did a great job. I literally have to just go by random. I'm gonna say.
Oh no! Don't say you're gonna go random. Give us some sort of. It can be as contrived as you want to make it.
Well, yeah.
Like you don't like BJ's hat or.
You just there can only be one guy in the room with a backwards hat, BJ. The pitch was phenomenal.
I respect that. I really respect that move. You know, I completely understand that. You know, I almost considered taking the hat off entirely once I saw that you had it on.
Who knew?
You're the head honcho here. You're running the show. You should be the one to take.
I told you before the show, BJ. I tried to tell you to take the hat off.
Hold that hat high.
Take the hat off. Get the
Good flow.
Oh, yes.
Good flow, baby.
Very
Good
nice.
flow. Love it.
It's too late, BJ.
You're still out.
You're still out, man. It's too late.
I'm waiting to get kicked out this time.
It's more fun for me if you get to kick someone like in the middle of them saying something. Like I don't know. I just
Do you
find.
have the power right there? Are you?
Oh yeah, no, I got all. Well, I think does everyone have that power, or maybe it's just me? But
You only have that power.
I enjoy that power, and it just makes it more special when you can cut them off mid-sentence. I don't know. It really does something for me. So anyway, all right. So this is our third round, and for this round, in an effort to make this thing a little bit shorter this week, as much as we love talking about the Vikings, we're going to have you, Luke, just pick a winner of this round as opposed to kicking off two people. So this is the final three, and what we're going to be talking about is kind of the state of the team and what we think are the biggest needs moving forward at this point. You know, we finished the first wave of free agency, kind of getting a better picture of what the roster looks like. So let's talk about what you guys think the biggest needs for the Vikings are at this point. And I'm going to ask for kind of a summary of what you think your top three ranked positions are. Adam, I know how much you love talking about team needs, so of course I'm going to start with you. So go ahead and get us going.
Yeah, I hate talking about team needs.
What?
But in the spirit of answering the question, they're just so fickle. They're going to change by the middle of September. It's all going to be different. But
Didn't you recommend this question? I'm pretty sure you gave me this idea. Don't try and throw the question under the bus during the show when it was yours.
I think I'll go ahead and appeal to Luke there and his answer on the previous one. But the interior offensive line, I think, is number one. We got to do something with that offensive line, and they've obviously started with Remmers and Reif, and hopefully they improve. There's some questions there. Zimmer talked about it today on the pass protection. But I also think pass protection, I think interior line is an underrated portion of pass protection. So much of your pass rush, especially in the modern NFL, comes up the middle. It comes from busting that pocket apart from the interior. And we saw a lot of that last year. And it's hard for Sam Bradford particularly to adjust to a pass rush up the middle or a blitzer coming up the middle that's just disrupting everything and forcing him to choose between moving right and moving left, as opposed to an outside rusher that narrows that choice down for you. I think secondly, I would probably place tight end. I like Kyle Rudolph. I don't think Kyle Rudolph is that great. And we've lost some depth at tight end this offseason already without a replacement plan. And I really think tight end is a position where you can improve your blocking, which is something we've already established needs to improve. It can improve your red zone offense, and it can improve your down the field, down the seam passing attack, which is something we didn't see a whole lot of last year, other than a few, two great Kyle Rudolph performances. Third, I would probably put linebacker. I hate to say replacing Greenway because that's not exactly true, but finding a weak side linebacker that can be a true difference maker on this defense. I see two missing pieces really, and that's finding a really awesome safety to play next to Harrison Smith before his career is over. That'd be great. But if I could take the next best thing, I'd say weak side linebacker, particularly this season. If we could get a real difference maker there and a well-balanced player.
So are you prioritizing the interior of the offensive line, or would you be what you are?
Yeah, interior offensive line, tight end, and weak side linebacker. That's my answer.
Okay. All right. Sam?
Well, I'd agree with Adam on the first one. I'd probably say a lot of offensive guard just because there's a big question mark at that right guard spot. And just the offensive line in general, I think that it's very easy and just probably the right call to say this is still the biggest need this team needs to address. They signed 2 new tackles, and that's great, but you look at it as we're 2 injuries away on the offensive line essentially from being close to the situation again we were in last year. Just a couple injuries. Riley Reif was the big addition. He went to the University of Iowa. We know we can't trust anyone from the University of Iowa. So you just, who knows? I mean, they did make some additions, but still question marks. I don't think, especially after last season, you can have too much depth on the offensive line. So I'd look at a guard, number 1. Number 2, I still say nickel corner. I don't trust Mackenzie Alexander to handle that role. I know Terrence Newman's back. I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but I still think they need a true nickel corner. I know that Zimmer said Alexander is going to get the first crack at being the starting nickel. And he just didn't show anything to indicate that he could do that last year. And that doesn't mean he won't improve, and I hope he does. But for right now, it's just a trust thing. Number 3, I do think backup quarterback. We know Teddy right now is not part of this conversation. And Sean Hill it looks like he won't be back. And I don't think Rick Spielman trusts Taylor Heineke. He's made some very, very salty comments about Heineke after what happened. They were really excited about him last year. And I think his incident about kicking through that door and missing all of preseason and essentially into the season, I think that really shook their trust in Heineke. And I think if Bradford goes down, you look at his injury history, and then, of course, the offensive line, which is still a question mark, there's a good chance that could happen at some point in the year. They're going to need a capable backup, so quarterback is the 3rd position on that list.
Heineke's just a really good friend, Sam, okay? I mean, you know how it is. Your friend's locked out of his house. I mean, what are you going to do? You know, you gotta get that door down, and you got to get him home safely. He was just being a good friend. And I don't think it's fair to hold that against him. But I do agree with you. We need a backup quarterback, which pains me to say as the president of the Teddy Bridgewater fan club. But all right, Austin, how about you?
Well, it's kind of hard to follow up 2 guys who have extremely similar ideas of what the needs are. Guard is going to be number 1 for me. I like what they have in the 2 guys at center right now. I think as long as you can get interior offensive linemen, and it's almost like what Luke said with running backs, just pile up the bodies, get as many bodies as you can, because you don't know what's going to happen. Just like quarterback last year, no one knew that Heineke was going to kick a door in and have to have surgery and be out. I mean, that screwed the team. And it almost goes back to what Adam says about needs are going to change. But if we're talking right now, before the draft, it's guard, and then I'm going to go backup quarterback, because I, like you, don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is part of the equation. Everybody can tell that Sean Hill isn't the guy, shouldn't be the guy, shouldn't be throwing a quarterback, or shouldn't be throwing a football anymore. And then the 3rd one, and it's not for the reason Sam says, but it's because the talent is so good. It's almost like it's not a need, but because there's so much there, you want it, is cornerback. Mike Zimmer, we all know, is a secondary guru, loves cornerbacks, is going to look at this draft class and say, look at all the talent that I can get, whether it be the 2nd round, the 3rd round, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever it is, and get guys who you can rotate. Who knows if Wayne's going to work out? Who knows if Jabari Price is going to be around? Mackenzie Alexander, I would like to believe, can do the job, and I believe he can, but outside of Terrence Newman and Xavier Rhodes, you don't have a lot of permanent options. So, like the offensive line, get as many bodies as you can.
It's interesting to me that all you guys said guard and then didn't have another position on the offensive line, because if I could give my top 5 needs, it would be left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. I mean, I'm coming from the perspective that I feel like we should just draft nothing but offensive linemen at this point, for the reason that I think Sam said, that we're 2 injuries away. Yeah, we made some signings that might work out for the team. That remains to be seen. but we're a couple injuries away from having the same exact offensive line, and I think we have to do everything we can to avoid that situation. But it doesn't matter what I think because I'm not being voted on. So what do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I just want to add it. I mean, you nailed that right there at the end, Brett, because I think that it's one of those where 30th in the league in offensive line, and Joe Berger was hands down your best offensive lineman. Now you could say it was due to injuries, but eventually you just can't play that game. And I love going to get 2 new tackles. That helps a lot. That was the biggest priority. He checked it off the box going into this offseason. He did that. Maybe not the biggest names that we all wanted, but he still did check that box off. But at that point, you're still right. You got Joe Berger. How long is he realistically going to play at that level? So a guard, a center, maybe a guy who can do both, like Ethan Posick. There's a kid from Ohio State, maybe, but maybe a tackle as well. You got 2/3, you got 2/4. I really expect them, or hoping they draft 2 offensive linemen, no matter the position, just to get bodies in there and some young talent in there in the first 3 rounds, or at least 4 or 5 picks. So it's not giving up on guys like, Rashad Hill or TJ Clemmings has plenty of valuable snaps. You can still develop and learn from afar. I think that Jeremiah Searles, Nick Easton, Zach Curran, you know what you're getting and how they're developing, and that's stuff that we just don't know behind the scenes. So maybe there's some hope from some of those guys, but certainly grabbing 2 guys on the offensive line, and really, like I said, try to turn this weakness into a strength. And then from there, just real quick, linebacker, I completely agree. When Chad Green was on the field, and Arif Hassan had a great article about this, teams were attacking him. I mean, he was that bad. He was a liability. The problem is there's nobody behind him now that he's gone. I don't think Edmund Robinson has really panned out and can be maybe relied on. Emmanuel Lemur, same type of thing. And I think as much as we play the nickel now, that's everybody's biggest argument. I think that until you can force teams out of that 4-3 base package, they'll always keep you in it and continue to run the ball and force to have that linebacker. So I think it's a sneaky need, a big need is linebacker. And I don't know who's going to be there. Another guy from Ohio State, Raekwon McMillan, as a 3rd-round guy, I think is a solid option as a 2-down guy. And then lastly, I agree we need a safety. It's a great tight end and quarterback class. I hope they get some good value later on, but quietly, defensive tackle is now a big need with the huge question mark of Sharif Floyd maybe never playing again. Obviously, Linval Joseph, Pro Bowl, All-Pro nose tackle, but behind what was Shamar Stephen, who's kind of a 2-down guy, and Tom Johnson, 33, coming off a torn hamstring, Toby Johnson behind him. I think, again, you want to win in the trenches. If you don't have stout guys in the middle, I think you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball, I guess. And Zimmer can only do so much. He needs some new talent. So I think defensive tackle, maybe not right away, but I certainly think they're going to have to now, again. And they know more than we do, but they certainly have to kind of plan for life without Sharif Floyd, which sucks,
Yeah, it does suck. What also sucks is having to get rid of 2 of these guys.
Yeah, that's tough.
We won't look at it like that. We're going to award a win to one of these guys. The other 2 guys are going to continue their night doing something else.
You're all getting a medal. You're in the final
Participation.
3. Bronze, silver, gold. You all made it to the final 3. But I think, the guy who brought the heat and the enthusiasm the whole night, Sam the Man.
Oh.
With that flannel popping off. Pop that flannel up for me. Pop the collar. And
I can't do that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. If I get to stay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
There you go. So, but great job by everybody, man. This was fun.
Leave it up.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
And I'm sorry, Luke. We're not done yet. You got one more question, okay?
One more.
Yeah. We're still going. So I'm going to kick these 2 gentlemen after I give them a chance to say something, and then we got one more question with Sam. Austin, do you have anything you want to say?
You're probably going to cut me off, but Luke, it was great. Have fun at the draft.
Love you, man. You bet.
And he's not cutting me off yet, so cool.
So that was weird. All right.
I'm just making it awkward. All right. Adam?
Thanks, Luke. Thanks.
All right.
Oh, wow, dirty. Don't go.
Wow,
Dirty.
Sam, you got a lot of screen real estate right now, man. Your face is very big on my computer.
Oh, because I see you on the other side. Okay, good.
Oh wait, so I'm the big.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Makes
sorry.
sense.
That sucks for you. You should try and rearrange them. Luke is much nicer to look at.
I
You
doubt
got both look great. I did not. There's no way I planned on being here. So.
Well, and it's fun because we're going to ask something that's kind of I don't want to say controversial topic, but it's something new for this show. So we're going to kind of get into the thick of it here on the final question. We're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick on a Vikings podcast, and not just Colin Kaepernick, but I think the Vikings have a little history of kind of dealing with a similar situation with a player that's very outspoken, kind of gets on the hot seat a little bit about things he's saying or things he's doing on the field. I think what was it when this wasn't a big deal, but Kluwe wore the what was it, like an armband or something for Ray Guy or
Right.
but I mean Kluwe had his history of getting into trouble. So I guess the question is should sports figures like Colin Kaepernick, like Chris Kluwe, use their platform as a celebrity, as a megastar, to make political statements? And so, yeah, it's kind of an interesting question, kind of a controversial question, Sam. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, yeah, I certainly wouldn't say to another man what he should or shouldn't do. That's up to everybody, and I think in America, as an American, you want to respect everybody's First Amendment right, whether or not you agree with what they're saying. That's the bedrock of our democracy. That's what makes this country great. And Kaepernick, personally, I respect a great deal for the things he's done, especially in the recent few years off the field. And I think he's good intentioned, and I just have a lot of respect for what he's doing. Chris Kluwe, I find kind of annoying. So we're talking about two kind of different things here. If I would say, if people are off-put by this sort of thing, I do understand it, because no matter where you go, it seems like in society, whether it's online, on social media, or whether it's in person, you are bombarded with political statements of one kind or another. Facebook used to be, when Facebook started, it was about trying to hook up with that cute girl in your class, or it was pictures of pyramids. It was fun, stupid thing. Poking, exactly. Now it's your uncle's rant about how Obamacare is the device of America. So it just, no matter where you go, we're assaulted with these things. So I can understand that sports being one of our last vestiges of an escape from politics, an escape from the rest of the world, which has so much more consequence than a football game. I can totally understand people just not wanting that to be brought into it, because it's not an escape anymore. I respect and completely understand people who want to, but I also think it's all right to just let sports be sports.
Yeah, okay. What about you, Luke?
Yeah, honestly, I don't get into a lot of these topics, so it's an interesting question to take on, and I think you hit a lot of valid points right out the gate. And for me personally, I don't take a lot of offense or get really irritated or agitated when I see guys using their spotlight that they were given or earned and doing something that's important to them. I think it's up to us to really, whether we want to listen or take that point and think it's valid, or give it more substance, or just change the channel. I think, like you mentioned, that's our God-given right, and freedom of speech is certainly that. So these guys know they're not going to get this spotlight forever. So if they want to do something more than just sports with it, then I certainly support them to do so, even if I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying. I think you're right. Colin Kaepernick seems like, now that we're looking back to Chris Kluwe's, much more powerful of use of his time, I guess, in media, which is a great thing, I think. And I think he's made a difference, whether we can see it right now or 5 or 10 years from now. I think he's made a difference and a ripple effect into, what he was trying to see change. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to see, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Sam. I mean, I think people are obviously rubbed the wrong way by Kaepernick, based on what he did. But I also think a large part of it is people just trying to escape from the politics, like you said, being bombarded with it everywhere, and just wanting to watch football. I kind of feel like that's also unfair for people to basically ask these guys who at the end of the day are regular people, they have opinions, to basically put all that to the side for the sake of a game and for the sake of someone else's entertainment value, but I do kind of I get that as well. So I guess another question I have is do you think Kaepernick is worthy of a spot on a team somewhere, or do you think he's being blackballed right now because of everything that happened? Sam, go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if blackball is the word, but the way I see it happening, of course he has the talent to be on an NFL roster right now. I don't think you could look at it objectively and say he does not. The problem is most likely he's going to be a backup quarterback, and Joe Thomas just made this point on Twitter the other day. But the reward for the risk, if you will, of having a distraction, which in some way it will be if you sign Colin Kaepernick, at least for a little while, just isn't there. You can find plenty of backup quarterbacks. I think Kaepernick is a good player that could eventually start again. I understand why teams aren't signing him, and it's obviously not just due to football. I also understand them not wanting the distraction. That's their choice to make. And if Kaepernick wants to have another job, I guess it's on him to somehow rectify those two things with owners or with GMs in the future. So he obviously took a risk, and he's paying a price for doing what he did, and it's great because clearly he believes in the activism, believes in the statements he's making. But right now he's having a hard time because of that distraction. Yeah,
it just kind of sucks that being outspoken or utilizing your right to have a stance on something is kind of blowing up in his face like this. I mean, I don't know, Luke. Do you? Let's just talk about the Vikings. How would you feel about Kaepernick becoming the backup QB for the Vikings?
Well, it's an interesting take because I think they need to not only look at that role pretty in-depth this year, but Sam Bradford's contract ends after this season, and then you just still don't know what you're going to get from Teddy Bridgewater. So we haven't seen Taylor Heineke. So as far as the talent goes, like Sam said, he's certainly talented enough. You look at his pedigree, a Super Bowl, a couple NFC Championship games. I mean, he certainly has that pedigree and talent to produce in the NFL. Let alone as a backup to a number 2 guy. But I think he knew what he was getting into going into it. Again, I think it's a pretty cool thing, and I'm for players using this platform to get, even if it's a highly controversial topic, but if it means something to them, get that out and try to get support and make some headlines and waves. But it's one of those things also that if I was running the show and I had to make that decision as a business decision, I probably wouldn't want Colin Kaepernick on my team. So, like Sam mentioned, not to reiterate too much, but I completely understand why, he's not necessarily being blackballed, but as the number 2 guy, you kind of have to be, have to have your mouth shut for the most part and can't be a distraction. And unfortunately, that's what he's going to be until something like this ends.
Yeah, I think when I saw that tweet from Joe Thomas, it was like, oh yeah, that's so true. Right. He hit it right on the head. So go ahead, Sam. You want to say something else really quick?
No, just real quick, because earlier we were talking about Joe Mixon, and it's two similar cases in terms of distraction, and obviously they're completely different things. And what I said was, for me, if you decide Joe Mixon is going to be okay going forward, and you have to deal with this little distraction, it's probably worth it. I think that times 10 for Colin Kaepernick, because obviously his distraction is essentially people could look at it different ways, but what he thinks a good thing, and Mixon's there's no way to look at it other than objectively bad. So I'd actually be okay and in favor of the Vikings signing Kaepernick and just dealing with whatever they have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Luke. We really appreciate you.
For sure. Had a blast, man. For sure. Anytime.
Yeah,
you are superior, I'll say, Luke, in both intellect and looks to the guy we had last time.
Okay. Who was that? Hoodie? Hoodie's probably watching this, and
shout out to Hoodie.
Shots fired. Yeah.
Or shots fired. Yeah.
Thanks for being on, though, man.
Sure. Luke, do you want to point anybody to anything, or tell anybody what you're working on something, or?
I guess specifically outside, just grinding a lot of tape right now. I mean, things are starting to really get fun and intense. Right, I think 32 days, I believe, maybe even less than that, until the NFL draft. But the Draft Rat podcast has been pretty much my my number one project and where a lot of my focus has gone. So we've had a lot of great guests lately. Charles Johnson, former Vikings receiver, David Morgan, the number 2 tight end now, Pete Prisco, Matt Miller from Bleacher Report. Hope to keep that same level of guest on moving forward as things get a little bit more intense, getting down to showtime, man.
I'm shaking my head because I'm just amazed at what you're doing. You're doing an awesome job. So I mean, if anyone's not following Luke on, I'm looking at the camera now. If you're not following Luke on Twitter, you need to get to Twitter, follow @Luke_Spinman. He's got some of the best draft and scouting content out there with a Vikings focus. So thanks again, guys. If you enjoyed your time with us, please like the video. You can also subscribe to be notified about future videos, and we'll be back next week. Thanks again, boys. Had fun. Appreciate it. All right.